Hello, everybody. This is the launch brought to you by Seconds Out and hosted by myself, Danny Flexen, and my good friend, Mr. Eamon Khan, who's dressed up for the occasion but didn't tell me until about 10 minutes ago.
Gotta keep you on your toes, and what an occasion it is, Danny. The launch of Seconds Out Live. I couldn't come up in, what is that, a salmon shirt? We gotta have something special here. I thought I brought a little bit of flavor on the show, looking ready to go.
A salmon shirt because we're going to be doing plenty of fishing, I'm sure. We're going to be here every Monday, usually at 5 p.m, unless one of us or both of us get delayed. There will be guests in the future, probably not on today's show unless someone surprises us. But there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, so much to talk about indeed, Danny. Look, top of the show being, of course, the Dillian Whyte situation. Now, we have covered this to quite a length when it first broke, the news Dillian Whyte failing another test for performance-enhancing substances in his system. But there are some developments, a few. They are scarce. We'll get into them in a second. But the ultimate thing is, as the biggest question is the show going to roll on Saturday night, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, we should recap what's happened for anyone who might have been living under a rock over the past couple of days. And that's just to put it briefly, Dillian Whyte's VADA test, at least one, and we'll talk about the reports of multiple tests in a minute, but at least one returned an adverse finding for a banned substance. The substance itself hasn't been revealed as yet. We got a press release through on socials and in our inboxes from Matchroom saying that as soon as they were made aware on Saturday morning of the failed test, they decided to cancel the fight. Dillian Whyte complained in his statement that he wasn't given any time to prove his innocence before the fight was called off. I mean, I don't know how much time he wanted, but even, I don't know, the Lincoln lawyer, or going back further to my generation, Ali McBeal, would have found it a pretty tough challenge to somehow clear Whyte and prove his innocence in 7 days, all with Joshua waiting in the wings, wondering who he was going to fight. So that never looked likely. I think Matchroom did the right thing in cancelling the fight, but they're still up in the air about whether the show itself goes ahead. And although Queen famously said the show must go on, I don't think Freddie Mercury was really anticipating what's gone down in the last couple of days. Although if he knew of Whyte's history, perhaps he might have had an inkling. I mean, we all hope for the sake of boxing fans, the undercard performers, and so on and so forth, that the show does go ahead. I would hope that unless Joshua fights one of the more celebrated names that's been rumoured to come in at short notice, the likes of Andy Ruiz or even Filip Hrgovic, who's already on the card, unless it's one of those big name guys, I would hope that the Zone make the sensible decision to take this off of pay-per-view and make it free to subscribers. But we've got a question, one of the first ever question on Seconds Out Live. This could make you famous one day. And it's from Z388Z. That's probably some sort of code. It says, Danny, I don't know why just me. Maybe he didn't know Eamon was going to be on here. But Danny, thoughts on the report from Fat Man Dan? I mean, I'm offended, first of all, but I hope you're assuming to Mr. Raphael, referring to Mr. Raphael, that Whyte failed multiple VADA tests. This likely means that Eddie knew about this for weeks. Another Conor Benn situation, ? Yeah, it's a very good question, that Z388Z. There's more than one Fat Dan out there, though, and I should point that out for copyright purposes. Dan Raphael reporting earlier on his social media accounts that he's heard from sources that Whyte has failed more than one VADA test in this particular fight build-up. Eamon, what did you make of that when you read it on Twitter or Instagram?
The first kind of thing I thought was like, how it just kind of poses more questions. Like when they say multiple failed tests, the questions that come into my mind are when and how many are we looking at here? We again, scarce details in these situations, and it's something that hopefully Dan will be looking to fish for more. And obviously, of course, we are looking to do the same too. But it still kind of leaves us with a head-scratching situation as to, where these kind of lie in the scheme of the actual build-up of the fight week. Now, we had Raheem speak to David Hay in the aftermath of Dillian Whyte's failed test, and he kind of got the impression quite clearly from Derek Chisora as well, that Derek Chisora maybe he's looking for the Mystic Meg type of role from the National Lottery. He predicted that Dillian Whyte was also going to fail a test too, so he knew in the aftermath. So you put these pieces together, and it does seem likely that people did know in the build up to it, but we don't know that for certain. Though it has to be said, there's no official kind of statement being said from Matchroom, from VADA. Those are things that we have to wait for. But if you were to kind of say that, you might be right in saying that people did know about this in the build up to this fight week.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a great look for boxing once again. Richard Dutton asks, has Eddie ever DPPV'd a show? I mean, maybe back in the Sky days, I'd have to have a look in the archives. Certainly not on DAZN, because they've only scheduled 2 UK pay-per-views, and both have been scuppered, or certainly the main events have been scuppered at short notice for the largely similar reasons. Which again goes back to it not being a good look, certainly for DAZN and Matchroom at the moment. Lee Mead says, I thought it was Lee Mead then, West End superstar, but it's not. It's just Lee Mead. Sorry, mate. Why is everyone saying that the event could still happen? I thought in the bathroom statement, I'm assuming it means Matchroom statement. I think predictive text has done him a bit of a danger there. They said it's cancelled. Now, it actually says in the statement that the fight's been cancelled. They made the immediate decision to call off the fight because one of the fighters wouldn't be able to compete in Dillian Whyte because of the adverse finding. It didn't say anywhere in that statement that the show was called off. And it is a stacked show. It is currently scheduled for the DAZN pay-per-view. But not only that, a lot of the undercard fighters have sold a huge amount of tickets. So I imagine Johnny Fisher, for example, who fights for his first professional title on the bill, has sold a huge number of tickets. So there's a lot to consider there. You've got a fight with the IBF #1 heavyweight in Hrgovic against Dempsey McKean. A lot of fighters, not just fighters waiting to get paid, but a lot of fans expecting to see the show. I don't think there's any other boxing UK prime time on Saturday night. There is the American show, which we're going to talk about in a bit. But yeah, it's a tough decision for them to make because they want to maintain profitability on the show, which can be very difficult in itself. But also they need to fulfill their obligations to the DAZN and put stuff out. And I think if they're going to go ahead with it, they should put it out on non-pay-per-view basis. And I think it'd still be a very watchable show. And also, if Joshua's got this fight lined up with Deontay Wilder at the beginning of 2024, they're not going to want him to go all that time and step into an incredibly dangerous fight without some rounds in the interim, even if it's not the kind of test we all hoped it would be.
Yeah, a question for yourself, Danny. You can answer this, and also to people in the chat. Of the fighters that you have in the poll there, which you're voting for as to who Joshua should fight on Saturday, how many of those would you pay pay-per-view for? I could see maybe 1, 2 at a push that I would potentially pay pay-per-view for, but it's a real kind of challenge here for the Matchroom team to actually find someone who does fulfill that pay-per-view status.
I think the only one that I would consider paying pay-per-view for would be the Andy Ruiz trilogy. Like, out of the names that have been rumoured, I didn't include him in the poll because it just seems so unlikely. But, Gerald Washington, definitely not. Derek Chisora, don't think that fight should happen. Never mind paying pay-per-view prices for it. That was a bit of a tongue twister. Who else? Hellenius? No. Once again, that's a no. I mean, these are all kind of B-class heavyweights, and AJ, until very recently, was considered A+, and he's still certainly A-, if not higher. So, no, I mean, I don't think any of those are a pay-per-view fight. I think Whyte, some people might look at that and scoff and say, well, maybe Whyte's a B+ fighter at best after what happened in his last couple of fights. But the other point to that is that there's a grudge there, there's history there, there's a reason for it to take place, and there's a reason to sell it beyond. I see Eamon shaking his head there. I think I know what comment that might have been at. But yeah, there's a reason to sell that fight. I think the only storyline you could use perhaps would be Chisora, but I just wouldn't want to see that fight. I think he took a long, pounding against Tyson Fury, and that's someone who's supposed to have genuine affection for him, as Joshua has. So if that's how you treat your friends, you know what I mean? I wouldn't want to see him go through that again, even though the money would obviously be great. And this is the thing as well. A lot of these fighters, even the Helleniuses of the world, will be probably asking for a hell of a lot of money because they've got a Matchroom over a barrel right now.
Yeah, Barry Murray saying that poll is ridiculous, terrible opponents. Well, these are the names that are in
sorry, Barry.
Or potentially in the mix here. Just a little
Eddie
aside.
Hearn. Direct your complaints to Eddie Hearn.
Just a little aside quickly, if you haven't already, make sure you smash the like and hit the subscribe button. We greatly appreciate your support, but there needs to be support for this card right now. And those names are, look, we've also reached out to our sources that will remain nameless for now, and they've kind of stated to us as well too, that Cavallel is in the mix, as is Gerald Washington, as is Robert Hellenius. We've had the confirmation from Washington's team that they've had a reach out from Matchroom that's been made, as has to Hashim Rahman Jr. According to the Daily Sport, that's Chris McKenna's beat. Robert Hellenius is now a serious contender. Hellenius somewhat coincidentally had a return to the ring a few days back. Maybe that was coincidentally made in light of what might have happened. Of course, it is also sensible to have a backup, but it also kind of maybe shows that maybe there wasn't a backup. If we're scrambling so much to find or if Matchroom are scrambling so much to find an opponent, was there a backup? Usually there'd be one straight up in place and ready to go, and it just seems like there is that scramble right now. There is a name I'd like to mention too. We're talking about narratives. We're talking about the potential to sell something. Ruiz doesn't make sense for me because I think that needs there's a real trajectory to kind of say that, look, with Ruiz, you could do the third fight later down the line if it makes sense for Joshua and Ruiz in the future. But there's one I feel that kind of fits in place, who's a credible enough opponent and has history with Joshua, and that being Joseph Parker. I know. Look, I don't think everyone will kind of take to that overly well, but of the names listed, and for someone who has had previous history with anti-Joshua, Joseph Parker fits the bill as someone who can come in on short notice and give anti-Joshua a bit of a test heading into a fight with Wilder. It kind of fits kind of all angles if you're looking for the bigger scope in terms of Joshua's future fight with Wilder, whether that happens later this year or the start of next year.
Yeah, I mean, keep your questions coming, by the way, and your comments. I'm finding a lot of them very entertaining, although many I can't actually read out on air in case we get cancelled in our first episode. But I texted Dempsey McKean earlier about whether he had been asked to step up, and he said no chance, although I'm sure he's happy to be fighting Filip Hrgovic with the chance to snatch that IBF #1 position. But I asked him, out of the names mentioned for AJ, who would he pick if he was AJ's manager? And he said Cavallel. And here's why. More like Whyte's style and size. Wilder slept Hellenius in a round as well. If he doesn't sleep him too, it will look bad. Which I think is a very, very good point. And I think Dempsey could be a good manager in the future. Not that Joshua's current management team are bad in any way. Let's not forget that none of this is at Joshua's door. You know, if he's willing to step in with someone even remotely dangerous at 7 days' notice, we have to give him credit. It is, of course, only the second fight with Derek James. And Derek James himself is not exactly in the best of times after Errol Spence's punishing defeat to Terence Crawford. So he won't want to take a second L in quick succession either. So you can't really blame them if they're ruling out people like Andy Ruiz. Polo says, oh, leave off, so boring, the last Parker fight. Yeah, and he's since been chinned by Joe Joyce as well. Yeah, it's not the best, but you've got to look at it in the context of 7 days to go. Like, would you rather AJ fight, and this is something you guys can answer in the chat, would you rather AJ fight a B or C class heavyweight, or would you rather he came off the show and they ran the show without him on non-pay-per-view? Yeah, so AJ against the substitute opponent, but still pay-per-view, or no AJ, no pay-per-view. Which would you prefer?
I'm quite surprised to see a lot of people voting in the majority, 45%, so not a large majority, but in a majority in the context of the votes for Derek Chisora, considering a lot of the hardcore fans not wanting to see Derek Chisora in the ring.
He's the most recognizable name, I guess. So in terms of kind of pleasing the casual fan base and keeping it on pay-per-view, I can understand why people are talking about Derek Chisora, because he is well known and he has got that backstory with AJ as well. In the, you know, they both trained at Finchley ABC. Joshua said before he kind of looked up to Chisora a bit on his way up into the sport when he first started. Obviously, a bit of a late starter, AJ. So there is that narrative you can sell it on. And I never thought they'd fight. I thought they were too close. I thought AJ held Chisora in too much reverence to make that a viable possibility. But I guess necessity is really the mother of invention, and it could happen. So Sunset here says, what about Conor Benn headlining? Are you suggesting he go up against Joshua? I mean, let's see. Has he been keeping up with his VADA testing over the last month or so? Do we want to get into that? And then, he's doubled down and gone for Philip Schofield now. Mods out there, can we ban this guy from the chat? No, I'm joking. Everyone's welcome, although maybe I'll reconsider reading him out in the future. Has he got a filter on his hair for it to look that great? No, I've just got a father who went grey very young, Adrian Charles, if that is your real name. Never liked you on Match of the Day.
He was also a silver fox as well.
Yeah, he was, yeah. He went grey very young, and he's handed that down to me, unfortunately. But yeah, no filters. It's a no filter selfie, unfortunately.
Chris Areola.
Is that just a random? Someone said that in the chat. Oh yeah, KB.
KB.
I was going to say that's not AJ's camp manager, is it? But that's KD.
KD.
To say that'd be a random shout from inside Team AJ. Yeah, Chris Areola. Why not? Flexen has the same colour as Henry Bowers in IT after he saw the deadlights. Thanks, Boxing Guru. Let's make my hair colour the focus of the chat. Why not? It's maybe slightly more palatable than what's gone on in boxing over the last couple of days and weeks and months if we include some of the other drug-based controversies. Yeah, I mean, we wait to see who AJ will take on. But let's not forget there is a big card taking place outside of the main event and maybe instead of the main event. We're yet to find out. A bit disappointed tonight's big launch event, Glitz and Glamour, has been cancelled. But we could still see the rest of the fight week festivities getting on. Eamon, what's your pick of the undercard or what could soon be the main card?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a rundown of the undercard, but we don't know what will remain of the undercard when we roll into Saturday night. So it could completely change as it stands right now. But as of right now, it's Chisora versus Washington. Which we discussed the thought of Derek Chisora in another fight, and for me, if he's cleared to fight, then he's cleared to fight. The final say belongs to Derek, and we can call for what we want in a situation that we really have no control over. In my view, if Chisora wants to continue to fight, and it's clear that he does, and he's medically cleared to do so, the fights I have interest in seeing are in ones that he's competitive in against and can potentially win. Not against a Joshua, not against a Wilder, not against a Fury. Someone like Washington makes sense in the moving scenarios when it involves Derek, as I mentioned earlier, but any other step-ups in competition, not for me personally. Elsewhere on the card, Philip Hrgovic versus Dempsey McKean, if that continues to take place. Dempsey's, he's limited in the tape that I've seen of him, but he's also limited in the tape that I've seen of him. There are certainly question marks surrounding Philip Hrgovic, who many had highlighted as someone to really be a force to potentially displace a Joshua, a Wilder, a Usyk, or a Fury, or any other heavyweight title holder in the last 5 years. That abruptly changed in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, when I saw for my own eyes in Jeddah, and many boxing fans saw for their own eyes, him really stumble and stutter against Zhilei Zhang, who many expected to see him blow out Zhilei Zhang, having seen Zhilei Zhang be less than stellar in the lead up to that fight too, against Jerry Forrest. Hrgovic, in my eyes, isn't that form of the Hrgovic we saw on that night. He'd lost his father, I believe, in the build-up to that fight, and he continued to fight on, which kind of gives a full answer as to why we saw that apparent disinterest in the ring when it got tough. So I'm expecting to see a much more explosive version of Philip Hrgovic in the ring, and unfortunately for the friend of the channel, Dempsey McKean, to be on the end of an explosive performance from Philip Hrgovic. Johnny Fisher versus Harry Armstrong. Nearly said Henry Armstrong there. Harry Armstrong. Look, Harry... yeah, Harry, absolutely no mug. I believe it was another good dear friend of the channel, Don Charles, who was working with him when he fought Jamie TKV, and Harry had a claim that he won the fight against TKV. I don't think too many supported that claim, but TKV has shown potential in the ring, as has Johnny Fisher, but this could be too soon for Johnny. I'd be inclined to think that this fight is a real barometer to show the relationship between trainer and fighter in Mark Tibbs and Johnny Fisher, in terms of how much Fisher has actually translated into his game, picked up from Tibbs, and that he can apply on Saturday night. I don't see Fisher going in as the proverbial Romford Bull at the O2 Arena in this fight. I expect to see a cagey affair where Fisher essentially is forced onto the back foot quite a bit and looks for openings and opportunities to really kind of hit those big power shots on Harry Armstrong. So, and in a 10-round affair as well, Danny, 10 rounds for Johnny Fisher, who's gone 6 rounds once. We'll really see what Fisher is made of on Saturday night. But those are my picks for fights to look out for on the undercard.
Well, the chat's really coming through with some left field suggestions. Smithy, number 1, says, what about Logan Paul? I hear he's a great boxer. Now, Smithy, you might not know this, mate, but Logan Paul's coming off a very tough battle of his own just 2 days ago at SummerSlam against Ricochet, where he used brass knuckles to take the victory on WWE's big party of the summer. So I don't know if we want a boxer like that coming over to our shores with his brass knuckles in his hand luggage. We've also had someone suggesting that they match Dillian Whyte against Jarrell Big Baby Miller because they apparently have some sort of similarities that we probably shouldn't outline too much on this show. He says just remove AJ from the bill completely. Amnon, if that's how you pronounce it. Sorry, the chat's moving faster than I am. Says Zhang battered Joyce. Hergovich's performance looks better in light of that. He'd beat AJ. Black Attack Squadron. Oh no, that's not. That's responding to another chat. John Henry says, all jokes aside, love the lives, keep them coming. Respect Danny, mate. Thanks, John Henry. It's not going to turn my hair back to brown, though, is it? Yeah, I mean, the undercard I find very intriguing, actually. Johnny Fisher, Harry Armstrong probably is the pick of it. Other than that, you know, you got Campbell Hatton, gets a decent fight, although I'm kind of ready to see him step up now. Adrian Charles, Flexen, why didn't you call Sheamus stunning like when you called Bailey stunning in your interviews? Yeah, it's a fair point, Adrian Charles. You seem to have developed a vendetta against me very quickly, unless you harboured it before at the start of this chat. We're on last name terms already, and you've misspelled Sheamus, which is borderline unforgivable. And he is a very, very attractive man, I'm sure, from an objective standpoint. It's just Bailey, as most people who follow me on socials will know, is a lot closer to my ideal body type. Danny Tawall says Shannon Briggs. Let's go, champ. Yeah, I mean, he hasn't stalked AJ yet in a motorboat, so I'm not sure he really qualifies. Going back to what we were talking about, I'd like to see Campbell Hatton stepped up a bit more now. No disrespect to Tom Ansell, who he's fighting. I think, you know, it'll be decent enough to watch, but I think he's more than ready to go at least towards kind of English-British title level now. He's had his apprenticeship. Johnny Fisher, talking of apprenticeships, that's lasted quite a long time. He was very raw when he turned pro, and I think he's needed that time to develop. But now under Mark Tibbs, I think he's ready for a test against the likes of Harry Armstrong, who incidentally has been training out in Spain with Daniel Dubois as Daniel Dubois gets ready for Usyk. A really nice facility out there in Spain that I know you, Eamon, have had the pleasure of seeing and staying in. I don't know how much of the training you got involved in with those guys, but maybe you can tell us.
Yeah, so first of all, just want to respond to Polo, who says, I'm blatantly sitting there in my pants or underwear and got the top off on. Well, Polo, what have we got here? We've just got nice little knot pants here going on here. Little special just for you, Polo. But in response to Harry Armstrong, look, Harry wasn't actually there in Granada, Spain at the time. At least he wasn't there when I was there. There were a number of other heavyweights there at the camp. That being the one that I saw was Moses Italma. Moses, look, a heavyweight, very much one to look out for and keep your eye on, one to watch for the Seconds Out team and in general in boxing public, because he looks someone who is really kind of passing each test as the test comes to him. Dobyshenko being a real kind of great win for him when we saw other heavyweights in the scene, namely Matty Harris, sparkle against Dobyshenko in the first couple of rounds, but then really falter in the later rounds and ended up on the losing end of the fight against Dobyshenko. So no sign of Harry Armstrong in the camp for Don Charles and Daniel Dubois, but looking to get the win on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be, I'm just looking at the chat, there seems to be a groundswell growing for Hughie Fury to step in. I've seen several chats suggesting he would be good. That's a long-standing kind of rivalry, or at least on Hughie's side. I'm not sure AJ mentions him a great deal, but I know Hughie would love that fight. Whether he's ready at short notice, he was due to return in September after a long hiatus. So presumably he'd jump at the chance of taking that. And hopefully he'd make a real fight of it. I mean, he'd go in with virtually nothing to lose, short notice against AJ. No one would really be picking him to win, including the bookies. Surely it's the ultimate kind of pressure off situation for Hughie Fury. You'd imagine that him and Peter Fury would jump at the chance. I might, as we're talking, if Eamon can fill a bit of time, I might text Peter Fury right now and see what he's got to say about that suggestion.
Yeah, you're very welcome to do that, Danny, and I'll pitch in here. But the flip side of that I'd offer is Hughie might like that, Joshua and his team might like that, Eddie might like that, but did DAZN like that? Because Hughie hasn't really kind of lit up the boxing scene in any sort of terms, in terms of being an entertaining fighter. He's got his own style. Respect him. What works for him works for him. Peter Fury has been looking to kind of dust down some of the skills that you have and make sure that Fury kind of stands still and looks to trade and be on top of the trades in his fights going forward. We've been looking forward to that side of Hughie, who has shown that in spurts of his fights, but we're not really fully seen that just yet. So I'd have questions as to whether the zone would want that coming off of when we'd expect to see a fight in Joshua Whyte, where you'd expect both fighters to at some points drop whatever game plan they have and really kind of look to kind of hurt their fighters. Hughie maybe at this point in time doesn't fully represent that sort of side of the fight equation.
And Roger Cook, again, I'm not sure if that's his real name. We're getting the kind of celebrities of my childhood here with Adrian Charles and Roger Cook. Actually, Roger Cook was even older. What's Otto Valiant up to? And Hughie Fury might be ready in 2043. He's only a baby. That's not very nice. If you can't, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Something I have never lived by, to be fair. But as for Otto Valiant, I got a text about 10 minutes ago from Dimitri Salita, who asked if we could go on Zoom in the next hour or so, because he's got both Otto Valiant and Jarrell Big Baby Miller ready, willing, and able to step in.
Not Jarrell.
Yeah, I mean, it won't be Jarrell Miller, will it? Because the board probably won't allow him to fight here anyway, and I'm not sure Eddie Hearn wants even more controversy surrounding this show. But also, Valiant's a good shout. You know, tough southpaw. Cut Tyson Fury, gave him a really tough fight. They fought in the amateurs, him and Joshua. Kind of makes sense. And if he's ready and willing, I mean, he's struggles to get fights, so it doesn't surprise me. I wouldn't be averse to that. What do you think?
Look, I'm not averse for it, and I think that there's a lot of goodwill from myself personally and from boxing fans in the UK to see Otto Valiant get an opportunity. Like you said, we saw him on his greatest stage today against Tyson Fury, and for another night, he might have come out with a win against Tyson Fury and really shocked the world, but he didn't. But the boxing public really kind of took to the way he handled that situation. We want to see him kind of, get another opportunity. However, slightly squandered that a little bit when he came over on the Boxer show, and I believe he fought Sokolowski, didn't he? Sokolowski, and he kind of labored to a win when we clearly know there's more gears to Valiant's game, but he really didn't show that, and I think it was a 8-round points victory or whatever it was. It ended up in points, so maybe he's kind of lost that little bit of momentum or a little bit of will that he did have, but in terms of him kind of coming in on late notice, like you mentioned, he's a southpaw who represents an awkward task for any fighter at the top, is at the highest of levels. Does Derek James really want to bring that problem and issue in when Anthony Joshua's had history of taking on different type of opponents at late notice and really kind of come up on the crazy end of a defeat in that instance against Andy Ruiz when he was supposed to fight Jarrell Miller the first time around in America? So do they want to take that type of risk, an unknown-ish quantity, even though there is that tape on him, but still at the highest level is able to pull something out, an unknown quantity at that level? Do they want to go with that risk? I still think that represents high risk to little reward as well. And again, doesn't quite fit the pay-per-view fit of the event too.
Talking of pay-per-view, Daryl 1967 says, why are they still letting people buy the pay-per-view? My counter to that, Daryl, would be, why are people still trying to buy the pay-per-view? Hang on and wait and see if you can save some money and just watch it for free. It's mental. Boxing Guru, is my new hairstyle and facial hair modeled after Colonel Sanders from KFC? Yeah, he's one of my many style influences. Funnily enough, I had a KFC today, wrap of the day, £2. And I think they're usually about £5.50, the Zinger wraps. I'm not being sponsored by KFC to say this. I just think it's incredibly good value. Just like my haircut. But
Danny, the chat are trying to turn your heel.
Yeah, it seems that way. Danny's aged a bit with an exclamation mark. Well, that's what boxing will do to you, Bill Morlett. You know, all these people failing drug tests and all the promoter shenanigans. It'll turn your hair grey as well, mate. Just be happy that I've stuck around. You know, I've got the staying power. My hair's still there, to be fair. It might be grey, but the hairline is still intact. So I'm not bald. Fingers crossed, touch wood. And we'll see how we go over the next few years. No more boxing controversies. It might even turn back to the colour it used to be. Paul Taylor says KSI versus Joshua. KSI will probably earn more money against Tommy Fury than he will stepping in against Joshua. As sad as that is for me to say, and I know we're going to talk about Jake Paul in a bit, but you know, it's a horrible world we live in, boxing-wise, when that's the case. Decent £2 for a wrap. Thank you, Roger Cook. The first time you've agreed with me in this chat. Woo! I don't think Roger Cook ever got cancelled. So that's good.
Pressure's off for you now. You made a friend.
Oh, just one, yeah. Hopefully he'll convince all the others to like me. Get LA Knight in, yeah. Well done, Barry Murray. We'll do our best. I don't know if I impressed him when I interviewed him, to be honest, in Docklands. I don't think he was. He seemed a bit knackered, to be honest, as well.
Here we go, Danny. Someone on my wavelength, Boxing Enthusiast TV. I wouldn't mind seeing someone like a Joseph Parker stepping in, similar size to White. Let me add to my call for Joseph Parker, someone who, let's not forget the referee, who I don't think we've seen in many major fights since, who was referee for the first fight between Joshua and Parker, really kind of imposed himself on the situation in that fight and didn't allow Joseph Parker to do any of his best work. And two, it's Joseph now who's someone who's really kind of rolling the dice and ready to throw caution to the wind. That fight against Joyce was a great fight. Look, he ended up on a bit of a shellacking towards the end, but he didn't stop trying and caught Joyce with some big bombs in that fight. Who doesn't want to see that version of Joe Parker against Joe Joyce, given the names in the mix right now as well?
Grime, I just need to address this before I go back to Parker. Grime says, Danny, would you consider boxing Kugan Cassius? Hold on, the chat's just scrolled down. In a Misfits event on the Zone, what would be your price for 4 3-minute rounds? First of all, you need to check with my counterpart if he wants to do 4 3-minute rounds, because that does seem a bit much for guys of our age and size. But 3 2s could be on the cards. I'd happily consider it. Make me an offer, the Zone. Markovsky, Alfie, whoever's watching, I'd certainly consider it. I've talked about it before. I wouldn't do it for free. I don't fight for free, much like Brock Lesnar. I think that was his old gimmick. But yeah, I'd certainly consider it. He'd have a weight advantage, I think, but I'd go for it. Oh, Danny, was it the Sonny Edwards saga on Twitter that caused your hair to go grey through stress? Adrian Charles, what have I got to do to win you round? No, sadly, it was already completely grey through then. That might have been the result. You know, it might have contributed to the result of what happened with Sonny's sister. You know, maybe she doesn't like grey-haired men. We'll never know. But yeah, it wasn't that, unfortunately. Flex and batters Cougs. Look, John Henry takes the name from the Liverpool owner or former Liverpool owner. So yeah, I'll take your support. I'm not gonna get cocky, John Henry. We'll see if they can meet my asking price first of all. So yeah, Joseph Parker. What I would say as well, another added bonus to that is that he is known to be good friends and training mates with Tyson Fury, of course. And that maybe wasn't the case, I don't think. No, it wasn't when he fought Joshua the first time. So you can kind of sell it on that basis. Maybe Tyson Fury would be ringside as well. He could get involved a little bit in the build-up, slagging AJ off, backing his man, Joe Parker. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. Rob Laidlaw says Bacoli, but too dangerous. I'm going to call Rob Laidlaw out as an alt account for Billy Nelson. I'm sure. You know, you're not fooling anyone with that picture, Rob. We know it's you, Billy. Mate, Bacoli's not going to get the fight, is he? We know that. But I'd love to see it. I think Martin's a great guy. I really like Billy as well. Oh, sorry, I really like you, Rob, with the inverted commas. But it's just not going to happen.
Danny, let me interrupt you. We've just had a bit of a development here. Or maybe I'm late to the scene, but yeah. Dan Raphael saying, Matchroom working with Joshua and DAZN on a restructured deal to go forward with Sunday's card that will no longer be a pay-per-view in the UK. Not done yet. Have we mentioned that? My apologies if we have.
No, we haven't. But yeah, I think that's common sense has prevailed with Matchroom there, as long as AJ accepts the restructured deal. You can understand. I mean, AJ can't be too upset about it, or he can be upset, but he can't be too stubborn about it because it's no one's fault except, potentially White's. We don't know yet because there's not been an investigation. All we know is that there has been an adverse finding, but it's certainly not his fault. John Henry, Cougs boxed in the amateurs for Sri Lanka, didn't he? Just reading this chat's going to have me in fits. Rob Laidlaw admits he's Billy Nelson. That's good to see. I think it makes sense that it's not on pay-per-view. I think they've probably decided now who the opponent's going to be, or at least got it down to 2. So maybe they know that it's not someone or a fight that people are going to be willing to part with 27 quid, was it, for AJ fights for. So yeah, I mean, if it's now going to be free, I say free, if it's now going to be part of a normal DAZN subscription, then fair play to Matchroom, fair play to AJ for accepting that, and let's name the opponent and get on with building it up. Adrian Charles says, give us a rendition of your favourite WWE theme and I'll become Team Flexen instead. I'm not sure which one is my favourite at the moment. I much prefer the AEW themes if we're talking like entrance themes. I think Jane by Jefferson Starship, which is Orange Cassidy's relatively new theme. He had the Pixies before, but they've changed it. Really like that song anyway, and I think it suits him perfectly. But let's get back to boxing. A few shouts for Dave Allen here. I'm sure Eamon will appreciate those, if not fully endorse them. Feels like it'll be Caballero. Yeah, I mean, Dempsey McKean, who's in the know, made Caballero the favourite. So we'll see. I feel like we should move on because we've talked about this so much, and it is the big story of the day. But there is another huge fight taking place at the weekend. This one in Glendale, Arizona, and it hasn't, as yet, been impacted by any pre-fight hitches or glitches. Although the challenger in the world title fight atop the bill has his own experiences with VADA, and that's Oscar Valdez, who will be challenging Emmanuel Navarrete for the WBO super featherweight crown. I think they call it junior lightweight in America, in American category. But yeah, so I think that's an excellent fight. So whatever we get from AJ and whoever he fights next, you can all look forward to watching that from Arizona, because Navarrete is never in a dull fight. Oscar Valdez, very rarely. I mean, even when he got absolutely pasted by Shakur Stevenson a little while ago, it was still pretty entertaining to watch. And I don't expect it will be anywhere near as one-sided this time around. I think it's a mouth-watering fight.
Yeah, look, Valdez stands the favourite both with the bookies and probably myself too, although Navarrete had an excellent outing against Wilson last time out. But the question I really ponder on for this fight coming into it is, who does the power edge really lay with? I'm not sure where I stand, and that that will remain to be seen. But I'm not sure where I stand really with Valdez's career, to be honest with you. Look, he looked absolutely excellent in shutting down Burchell, creating a highlight reel KO of all highlight reel KOs when he knocked him out. He looked like a magician in that fight on that night, gliding around the ring and creating angles and creating opportunities to really hurt Burchell. All fantastic. And then in the lead up to his next fight, I believe it was against Robson Conceição, he then test positive for portent-sensing substances himself, and you really kind of got to ask the question, was that linked? Was that part of it? Was it before? Was it then? This is an isolated incident. We don't know, but it really kind of puts the career into question when things like that happen. After the fact, look, he fought Shakur, and there's no real shame in losing to Shakur, who's a real elite in the game, and I believe will go on to prove to himself and to boxing fans as one of the pound-for-pound stars, if not the pound-for-pound star in the very near future. I think it's an all-action fight with both fighters looking to end the fight at any real notice whenever they can. Navarrete, for me, is essentially undefeated, having suffered a defeat early in his career, I believe around 2012. And whilst Valdez is the more multi-dimension fighter, he looked out of sorts, like I said, against Shakur, a fighter who knows who he is, who doesn't try to be something he's not in the ring. He's a fully accomplished fighter and is great at what he does. As is Navarrete, someone again who knows what he is in the ring. Less dimension, like I mentioned, against Valdez, but a real pressure fighter, a real volume puncher too. And I think Navarrete is going to pound him into a TKO finish late on in the fight, but a great fight along the way as well too, with Valdez getting enough success throughout the fight.
Amnon suggested, going back to Joshua, Matt Sexton. I think what you've done there, Amnon, I'm sorry to say, is made a confused amalgamation of two former heavyweights in Sam Sexton and Matt Skelton. But I'm not sure if either of those guys would be available at this stage. Boxing Guru deserves a bit of credit for digging out my pad work video with Spencer Fearon for pure mockery. To be fair, it was 15 years ago, and it was my first ever time on the pads. I'm not saying,
and it's still terrible.
Yeah, I'm not saying I've got any better since, but maybe I'm just lulling people into a false sense of security. Maybe I knew that 15 years later, a big money fight could be in the offing.
You sound like George Kambosos with the Art of War.
I'm often compared with George Kambosos, especially when I take my shirt off. But moving on from that, we got to reflect on last week as well. Hark back to reflections, if anyone remembers that. Jake Paul got his latest victory, came back from losing to Tommy Fury to beat a former UFC star in Nate Diaz. I don't pretend to know much about Nate Diaz's legend. Maybe a little bit more about Jake Paul, purely in the last couple of years. But Eamon, I'm sure you would have been glued to that event. What did you make of it?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to ask a question to the chat here, open question to you guys. Where do you guys stand on Jake Paul? Because it seems like he's really turned the corner in being someone who was presented as a gimmick, but then through his fights, through his dedication that we've seen to improving his craft and through really kind of taking his licks as well in the ring, he seems to have been accepted now by boxing circles, by boxing fans, than he was originally at the first time around. I think he kind of tempered down, saying sort of things like he was an elite level fighter and people didn't see him as that. He's kind of really kind of tempered that side of him down and really kind of just ingratiated himself with the fans too. That might also lend to the fact too that you've got this misfit scene, and when you direct this social media influencer scene and the level that they're fighting that, and then you look at someone like Jake Paul, you kind of can say, oh, well, there is a more of a bottom to kind of reach to. And Jake, still in the novice stages, has kind of really kind of taken that boxer status now. But yeah, open question to the chat as to whether you've turned the corner on Jake Paul. Now, in terms of the actual fight with Nate Diaz, look, I watch UFC. Don't watch the full scope of MMA of Bellator and PFL. I dip in and out when it comes to the UFC scene. So I'm not a hardcore fan. I'd say I'm probably somewhere around the medium fair with UFC. But Nate Diaz was a little bit before my time. But Nate, from what I know, has got a lot of credibility for being someone who's a real kind of street fighter type, almost maybe akin to like a Caleb Plant in some sort of way. He's got that kind of like street kind of feel to him, and someone who will always give their best in the ring and won't be afraid to give you 3 back if he's taken 2 from you. And that was kind of what it was in the ring against Jake Paul. He hurt him early in the fight in the first round, and then he hurt him kind of late on, a shot to the temple, a weakened temple for all the shots that Nate Diaz has taken in his career, certainly. Nate was able to kind of climb up the canvas, weather that storm with his crafty little experience tricks of kind of shooting off to the side, presenting like he was uninterested and pretending to be hurt in the ring to kind of buy himself that time. But in terms of his ability to actually put any lasting damage on Jake, it was not minimal, but there wasn't any real jeopardy for Jake apart from the gas tank that Nate Diaz is famed for. That cardio that Nate Diaz has, he was able to impose a volume of shots, albeit not that effective. He was able to kind of touch Jake Paul at times with some uppercuts, and to see if Jake really had that cardio, where sometimes in a fight against like Tyron Woodley, he really kind of gassed out in that first fight against Tyron, and then the second fight got that amazing knockout, although some people do question that. The question that I had going into the fight, though, we spoke to Donna Corby, who covers the MMA, he's an influencer insider as well too, and I asked him, what is this fight doing for Jake Paul that an Anderson Silva didn't do for him, a Tyron Woodley didn't do for him? And there wasn't really an answer for that apart from giving Jake Paul a win, a W back in the win column after that defeat to Tommy Fury. The other side of it as well is Nate Diaz is seen as someone who is a monster pay-per-view seller. Although his performance in the press conference wasn't standard Nate Diaz fare, Nate Diaz still has a a real hardcore following of fans who will purchase pay-per-views, watch him, and support him. You saw that in the press conference, although there were some very choice words which were, wouldn't be accepted by a lot of people. A lot of people will still accept and press the button to buy. So we'll see if that's the case when the pay-per-view numbers are presented. But a money-spinning opportunity for Jake Paul, an opportunity to get a win in the win column for Jake Paul, and then present a new and improved Jake Paul, who's moved training camp teams. Now he's split with BJ Flores, who's still sort of with the team, but more so now with the Jalen Loves and the Shane Mosleys now as well. Trying to kind of improve himself to set himself up for a rematch with Tommy Fury, potentially win that, and then set up a fight with KSI, who is, of course, fighting Tommy Fury next too.
Yeah, I mean, before we go back and round off this week's episode and I go and buy some Just for Men, I just want to present the results of the poll. We asked at the start of the episode, who would you like AJ to fight on Saturday? Now, Dillian Whyte has been ruled out. And Derek Chisora has got 41% of the vote, more than twice as much as anyone else. The other three guys got much of a muchness. I think it was like 2017, which doesn't add up to 100. I need to look into that. But yeah, Derek Chisora seems to be the overwhelming favourite out of the names that have been rumoured to go in and face Anthony Joshua. Well, this doesn't marry up with the comments I've seen online.
Yeah, it's very strange. Again, I've made myself clear on the point of Derek Chisora. I think you said it as well, kind of like if we're looking to see this new form of Anthony Joshua is returning back to his getting that killer instinct, really pushing on the gas when a fighter is hurt and looking to seal the deal and close the night with a knockout. Someone he knows very well, someone who the boxing public knows he's taken a lot of licks. Will we see that side of Anthony Joshua? Will we just see someone who gives him a length of rope to go with and maybe see to a points victory? I don't know. I don't feel it's the right fit. It is the right fit in terms of that pay-per-view point, but that's now seems to be off the table, so we can close that side to it. Will it bring in the fans? I think so. Derek Chisora is very much well known. They love to support Derek, regardless of what they think about him being in the ring or not. Does it present an interesting conversation about an actual fight between the two? Yes. Could you imagine, Danny? Let's talk about this for a second. Could you imagine if Derek Chisora pulls off the absolutely impossible and defeats Anthony Joshua on Saturday night? If they do go ahead with the fight, what would that say about Anthony Joshua's career? What does that say about people who don't want to see Derek Chisora in the ring? That presents itself an interesting possibility, whether small or remote or not. I guess, if the fans want to see it, the fans vote with their feet, the fans vote with their pay-per-view buys, maybe it happens.
You've done Eddie Hearn's job for him there.
That's why I'm wearing a suit.
Yeah, made the case for AJ there. Sorry, for Derek there. But yeah, you said, can you imagine if? I was like, no, definitely not. Cannot imagine it. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't begrudge him the payday, Chisora. Feel a bit sorry for Gerald Washington, though, if he falls off the card. But, what can you do? But I think we're going to find out in the coming day, hopefully, if not 2 days, who AJ will be fighting. We do hope he stays on the show, of course. And the fact that it's likely to now be not pay-per-view makes it even better. They've taken a negative, made it positive, taken chicken you-know-what, and made it into chicken salad. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the launch episode of SO Live. I hope you'll be with us every Monday at 5 p.m. To talk about what's going on in the boxing world. We're not going to have an enormous story like this every week, but I hope the stuff we talk about and the fact that we include you guys so much in it and, answer as many of your questions and read out as many of your comments as we can, breed some sort of loyalty, because loyalty is very important. But really appreciate you tuning in and hope to see you all in the weeks to come. Eamon, any closing remarks?
Any closing remarks? Look, keep it tuned in to Seconds Out. We'll keep you abreast with the developments as we get them. We do have Frank, the videographer, and also Ray Rahim on the scene this week, if there is this fight week. This week, so they'll be bringing you the content as well as myself and Danny Flexen around this developing story But yeah, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. We obviously much appreciate your support. And again, we've got much more boxing content coming your way very soon. Every Mondays, like Danny said, every Mondays. Did I mention, Danny, every Mondays at 5 p.m.? 5 p.m.? Did I say 5 p.m.?
What day is it, though?
It was Monday.
Oh, okay, Monday.
And did you say 5 p.m.?
I think it was 5 p.m. Frank, the videographer, reminded me of Cedric the Entertainer. Like his pasty videographer.
That one's going over me. What are we? Is this a 1990s reference?
Oh, I guess it might. No, Cedric the Entertainer wasn't that long ago, was it? Early 2000s at worst, surely.
I barely got your Lee Mead one. I believe that was from that show where they were trying to find a new West End star.
It was Joseph.
He dated Denise Van Outen, right?
He did. I think he might have married her.
Really?
Not that that's an awful thing. Like, it sounded terrible, then. He might have married her. He went and married the woman. No, but yeah, I think they were married. Maybe they still are. But yeah, Lee Mead they had a series of reality shows where they were trying to find West End performers. And he got the Joseph role. There was another one for Nancy and Oliver. And there was one for, what was it? Somewhere Over the Rainbow, whatever one that is as well. I used to love those shows. I make no bones about it.
Wasn't there a moment in that show? Look, this is probably the after show stuff, but forget it. We'll hold that. We'll see what the comments are saying in a second. But wasn't there a moment in that show where one fella got eliminated and they have to sing a song right at the end? And then he sang the song and he went off script and he was like, "And see me on my own show," or something like that. Proper went off script.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, He was never seen again though. Philip Schofield had some choice words for him. I seem to remember. No, I'm joking. That did not happen. Not that he's in any position to be suing anyone, so maybe we should just go all in. And talking of all in, no, we haven't got time for that. Really appreciate you all watching. See you again next Monday, but stay tuned to Seconds Out. As Eamon said, Frank and Raheem are on the scene, and we'll be doing some Zoom calls as well around that. Dimitri Salita wants to speak to me in the next 10 minutes or so, so we'll have that up tonight. And we'll see who wins the AJ sweepstakes.
Cheers, guys.